Hey up everyone, welcome back to the History of Football channel. Today on the channel I'm going to be talking about some of the most bizarre managerial appointments in football history. Sometimes when a club signs a manager, it's not a surprise to anyone. Sometimes it is a bit of a surprise, and occasionally you get ones that just leave you scratching your head thinking, really? They signed them to be their manager? So today we're going to be looking at some of the most bizarre managerial appointments in football history. First one is David Moyes signing for Real Sociedad to become their new manager. After his disastrous spell at Manchester United, Moyes was out of work and looking for a new challenge, but nobody expected him to go to the Basque Country in Spain and sign for Real Sociedad. Admittedly, his spell at Real Sociedad got off to a good start. He did win a couple of games, including where Real Sociedad beat Barcelona 1-0, but more often than not he'll be remembered for his failure in Spain. He was sacked not long after joining the club, and he'll also be remembered for the press conference he did where he admitted that he hadn't seen the team or the B team play, but he'd trained with some of the players, and he famously said in a press conference, "I've seen the players train uno, dos, tres, cuatro times." And that's as far as David Moyes' Spanish speaking skills went. Harry Redknapp being manager of the Jordan national team? Yes, it did happen. Harry Redknapp had a long history as a manager in the English game. For well over 30 years he managed in England, and he did have some success there, winning the FA Cup with Portsmouth. But in 2016 he became Jordan's manager, and he only featured in 2 matches with Jordan. The first was an 8-0 victory over Bangladesh, and that was in a World Cup qualifier for the 2018 World Cup. His second and final game for Jordan was against Australia, where he lost 5-1. After this, he never managed Jordan again, and he stepped down from the position and ended up back in England with Birmingham City. Paul Gascoigne as manager of non-league Kettering Town. This occurred in October 2005. One of England's greatest ever players, Gascoigne, became manager of Kettering Town, and a lot of people said that he would be sacked before Christmas, and it turned out that way. He only lasted 39 days in the role when he was dismissed. The owner of Kettering Town claimed that Gascoigne showed up to the training ground every day and to matches having already consumed a few pints or whatever alcohol he was drinking, and in response Gascoigne come back and said that the manager position at the club was always going to be a tough one, due to the fact that the owner of the football club wanted to be the manager himself. He interfered with everything that Gascoigne did apparently, and Gascoigne also claimed that he was unpaid for the entire 6 weeks that he was at the club, and he wasn't paid any of his severance pay either. Gary Neville at Valencia? Nobody saw that one coming. Neville was named as Valencia's new manager in December 2015. In his first match in charge, Valencia lost 2-0 against Lyon in the Champions League, which resulted in Valencia being sent down to the Europa League as they finished 3rd in the group. In the first leg of the Copa del Rey semi-final, Barcelona defeated Valencia 7-0, and by the time he was sacked in March 2016, after being in the job for 4 months, Neville had only won 3 of the 16 matches he was in charge of Valencia, and in every single one of those matches, Valencia failed to keep a clean sheet. Not a surprise to anyone though, Neville has never managed a team ever again after his failure at Valencia. Tony Adams' appointment as Granada manager in 2017. Prior to managing in Spain, Tony Adams had managed Wycombe Wanderers and Portsmouth in England, and he had also had a management job in Azerbaijan, but there'd been a 6-year gap between his appointment in Granada to when he last managed in Azerbaijan. In his first press conference, Tony Adams vowed that he would kick some of the players up the ass, as Granada were in trouble of being relegated from La Liga. Adams would subsequently lose all 7 matches that he was in charge of Granada, and the club would end up being relegated from La Liga at the end of the 2017 season. Adams might be an Arsenal legend, but as a football manager, he's never managed since his failure with Granada. Alan Pardew's appointment as ADO Den Haag's manager in the Netherlands in the 2019-2020 season. Pardew had previously managed in England with Crystal Palace, Newcastle United and West Ham United, but in 2019 he was bizarrely named the manager of ADO Den Haag in the Dutch Eredivisie. In his 8 games in charge of Den Haag during that season, the club only managed to win 1 match and was saved from relegation due to the fact that it was during the COVID season where the Eredivisie announced that there'd be no relegation for any club. After only being in the job a couple of months, in April 2020, Pardew and Den Haag both agreed to end the contract of his tenure in charge of Den Haag by mutual consent, and this was a relief for the supporters because, by all reports, he wasn't popular amongst the Den Haag fans. Edgar Davids as Barnet manager? Yes, it did happen. Initially he signed on as a role as player coach, but then eventually became the full-time manager of Barnet. He was unable to save the club from relegation to the National League, however he was retained as manager for the following season. Davids would continue to play and manage the squad in the National League. In the 8 matches that he played in the National League, he was sent off in 3 of those and he was booked in every other game that he played. There was also reports that he refused to attend away matches. Another bizarre thing that Davids announced was that he was going to wear the number 1 shirt as a midfielder, which is normally the shirt worn by the goalkeeper, but he said at the time that he wanted to make it a trend that midfielders would wear the number 1 shirt. Thankfully, this trend did not catch on. In 2014, Davids stepped down as manager of Barnet as a player and a manager, and he didn't end up managing again until 2021, where he took over Portuguese side Olhanense, but he was only sacked after a couple of months in that job. It always seemed a bit strange for me that Davids even played for Barnet, considering the glittering playing career that he did have and all that he achieved as a player, but to him, managing Barnet has to be one of the most bizarre managerial appointments I've ever seen. David Hockaday as Leeds United manager? Do you remember that one? Well, it did happen. David Hockaday was a strange appointment by Leeds United, considering that his previous job was with National League side Forest Green Rovers, where he was in charge of them for 4 years but didn't really have much success. Hockaday was only in charge of Leeds United for 6 matches, where he recorded 2 wins, and after 70 days in charge he was terminated by the club. After leaving Leeds United, Hockaday signed on with Kidderminster Harriers in the National League, but he was sacked by them after only 10 games in charge, which left them bottom of the National League. Joe Kinnear as Newcastle United manager. Kinnear's appointment as Newcastle manager was seen as a strange one, as his last job was with Nottingham Forest 4 years earlier. Prior to that, he had managed Wimbledon in the Premier League for 7 years, and he was also manager of Luton Town for a time. Kinnear's time at Newcastle wasn't a good one. He was known for ranting at journalists and reporters. There was one early press conference that he did in his time at Newcastle where he reportedly swore at journalists and reporters 52 times. He also got players' names wrong. Apparently he called Charles Nzogbia Charles Insomnia. After not even a year in charge, Kinnear unfortunately had to step down as Newcastle United manager due to a heart condition which required surgery. Alan Shearer took over as an interim, and by the end of that season Newcastle United were relegated from the Premier League. Claude Anelka at Raith Rovers. Now we all know Nicholas Anelka, but Claude Anelka, that was his brother, and to become Raith Rovers manager he apparently pledged £300,000 as part of his investment into the club, and they would make him their full-time manager. When he signed on as Raith Rovers manager, Claude Anelka promised that the club would be competing with the likes of Rangers and Celtic, and they would be a dominant force within Scottish football. However, that's not how it turned out. Anelka had never managed a football team before. He were a part-time DJ, and some of the signings that he made were reportedly from the Parisian suburbs, where he noticed people playing 7-a-side football and gave them contracts to go and play for Raith Rovers. Anelka was in charge of Wraith Rovers for 10 matches where they didn't win a single game. They recorded 1 draw and 9 losses, which left them at the bottom of the table. Strangely enough, after being terminated as manager, Anelka stayed on as director of the football club, but then he departed at the end of that season. Tottenham Hotspur appointing Christian Gross as their manager in 1997. This was seen as a bizarre one, as before that, nobody had really heard of Christian Gross before. He had managed in Switzerland with Grasshopper, but he'd never had a big managerial job before. When Gross took over at Tottenham Hotspur, they were in the relegation zone, and even though improvement was seen within the squad and the results, he was mocked relentlessly by the British tabloids due to the fact that he had a poor grasp of the English language, and in his first ever press conference he arrived late from Heathrow Airport, where he brandished a London Underground ticket saying, "I want to make this the ticket to me dreams." After not even a year in charge, Gross was sacked by Tottenham Hotspur in September 1998, where they suffered a dip in form. In his last 10 matches, Gross only recorded 3 victories in charge. Hristo Stoichkov as Celta de Vigo manager. Stoichkov is regarded as Bulgaria's greatest ever player, and he did manage the national team before taking the role at Celta de Vigo, but he'd never managed in clubland before. In his first press conference, Stoichkov got off to a bad start by stating that he didn't watch opposition games, he didn't believe in training or tactics, and he implemented a bizarre 2-4-4 attacking system at Celta de Vigo, which was deeply unpopular amongst the playing group and the fans. And known for his fiery temper, he did fall out with a number of players at the club. Not surprisingly, Stoichkov only lasted 6 months in charge of Celta de Vigo. The club was relegated at the end of the season to the Segunda division, and Stoichkov went on to go manage a couple of other clubs to not much success. So there you have it, some of the most bizarre managerial appointments in football history that I've come up with today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, let me know in the comment section below. If I've missed any bizarre managerial appointments, let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you, because these are the ones that I could find or I remember, but if I've missed a couple, let me know in the comment section down below. Anyways, this has been History of Football, and I will catch you all later in the next video. Alright, ta-ra for now.